Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Scale Computing Technical Roadmap session. Today, we're joined by William von Kullenberg, and we will be covering virtual desktop and server-based computing infrastructures in this session. William, take it away.
Thank you. Today's topic, VDI, and I myself think that VDI is always a over discussed, under discussed thing in the sense that we talk about it a lot, but we're actually not talking about the things that are really important or that aren't, and we talk too much about things that are not important. Today we're going to talk about the solution overview. So what's in there? We're going to discuss some use cases in there. A general architectural overview, some sizing guidelines, and some information about what's to come into the partner portal about sizing guidelines, a little bit about our partnerships, and a short demo. And after that, I'm going to hand over to Chris. So the solution overview. I was thinking about how do I make this how do I make a simple thing as complex as possible? And basically, what you're seeing here is the mathematical formula for running around in very short circles. R times 15 makes the circle a lot smaller. Quite often, when we talk about VDI, it is presented as being complex, cumbersome, and not just by the people who are selling, but also by a lot of the engineers that we have running around in the field that need to make sure that you are paying them the money that they want to create these designs for you. So skill computing has proven over the years that we are able to provide you with a solution that is good, affordable, and simple. And I think that if you want to do VDI on skill computing, you should also do I'm not going to say cheap, I'm going to say affordable, simple, and good. So let's get to it and let's make all those very complex things a lot easier. So when we talk about VDI, quite often we're actually talking about two different technologies. We're talking about VDI and we're talking about SBC. We're talking about virtual desktop infrastructure and server-based computing. And basically, what I've put in the slide is a little bit of what's the difference between the two of them. So VDI is where you provide a Windows client operating system as a single entity to one of your end users. So you provide either a full desktop or an application with isolated resources. What do we mean with isolated resources? Isolated resources means that Windows 10 or 7, usually it will be 10, desktop will have its own RAM, its own CPU designation, its own hard drive assignment, and no other user can interfere with that, which is opposed to server-based computing, where a lot of users actually share the same resources. So with server-based computing, I set up a RDS host or a terminal server or whatever you want to call this, and I provide a full desktop or an application. Keep in mind that with both solutions, we either provide full desktops or applications, but then with shared resources. In other words, multiple users, usually between 20, 25, 30, log in at the same time on the same entity and share its resources. The downside of that being, let's imagine having Microsoft Access running as an application, and one of the users runs select star from star, a very complex query on that Access database. This might negatively impact all the other users that are on the same system. With VDI, we allow for specific per user configurations, and with server-based computing, everyone is kind of the same depending on Active Directory groups or group assignments, rights assignments, of course. With VDI, you get full resources even if you have to do a small task. You always log into that same Windows 10 machine. Even if you only log into that Windows 10 machine for using calculator, you get all the resources assigned that you need and that Windows 10 machine has. And with server-based computing, you only get the resources that you are capable of consuming right now, and the rest stays open for others. So in general, with VDI, you will have a larger resource overhead with the benefit of resource isolation. with server-based computing, you will have a lesser resource overhead, but also lesser resource control. So which one should you use? Well, it obviously depends. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. When we look at the product portfolio of Scale, it's not really hard to see what we mean here. We have 5 products which you can configure in a multitude of ways. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the amount of SKUs that we have actually runs into the thousands for only 5 different models with different configurations. This allows us to keep it very simple because there's only 5 configurations, but it also allows us to be very flexible and give our end customers the kit and the stuff that we actually need. And I think that with our partnerships, depending on the use case that you are using, we can give you that same flexibility in what we're doing here. Good news here is that it's not a price discussion, or price is not a discussion. Same with the Scale Computing solution itself. We've also looked at price point when we were selecting our partnerships. Secondly, obviously it's based on technological requirements, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that in the next slides. And lastly, it's also very dependent on what are you already comfortable with, because that has the least training overhead for you. Use cases. What is the specific reason for looking into a remote computing workplace, be it VDI or SBC? As you can see, I've got a long list with different things that I could come up with. If you can come up with other use cases, please let us know. But these are the ones that I could quickly cook up. And I'm not going to discuss all of them, but one of the most often heard use cases is bring your own device. Bring your own device. So with more laptop models than snowflakes in a blizzard, it becomes harder to choose a model that everyone is happy with. So what we see more and more in environments is that we're no longer managing the device that people are working on, but we're managing the stuff that they are working with. And by doing that, we can go to a bring your own device or choose your own device system. Same as back in the good old days, at least here in Europe, when you got a job, you got a company car. Nowadays, you're getting a fee for using your own car. More and more, we also see people going to a model where you get a fee for using your own laptop. Obviously, you cannot manage somebody else's device, so you need to do other things to make sure that your network is secure and that no end user information ends up in your environment. So you can use SBC or VDI as a way of provisioning your users with that application without having to install heavy tools on their systems. The next one that you actually, which is really easy to combine with that, is remote work, or combining education with this. So in education, and especially in IT education, we see the requirement of quickly stood up environments, quickly stood up classrooms that can be used for a short while and then just be deleted again, but be accessible from students' own devices. If you just think about the logistics behind that, that's an absolute nightmare. And I can't imagine all the work that needs to go behind that if you're going to do that with physical imaging. So being able to give your students a remote desktop for every class that they need would actually be a very big benefit. Rapid deployment, and that's actually just following up that one, but rapid deployment, meaning if I need to have an application deployed to my workforce really, really quickly, and I need to install that at every system. Obviously, there's management tools that can do this for me, but they usually come at a premium, whereas with a VDI or an SBC environment, it is really, really easy to just open up a single template, install that application into that template, install that update into that template, install that a quick patch that you need, the security patch, into this image and redeploy it. And this can be done in a matter of minutes. Obviously, I would like to go over all of them, but that would be a bit too much of our time. Believe me, I can talk hours about this. But yeah, there we go. Let's have a small poll. So out of the ones that you see over here, which one would you actually like to see discussed? I am not seeing how many votes there are, but
I'm seeing the votes, and it's a very close neck and neck between mobile access, flex workforce, and eliminate the need for VPN. With eliminating the need for VPN, looks like it might nudge it out. We're at 70% voted. Once it cools off a little bit, well, it looks like eliminate the need for VPN took the lead, and we're at it was close, but eliminate the need for VPN took the lead in the end. It looked like a horse race for me watching that. It was quite exciting. So thank you all for participating. But William, that gives you some direction.
Yeah. So eliminating the need for VPN. One of the things that we've seen happening quite a lot since basically since we got into this current situation with COVID is notebooks weren't available. Nobody could get any equipment. People needed to have quick access to internal environments because they had to work from home. We actually had quite a lot of that internally within our own company too. And one of the things that we saw was that because people needed a place to work, very quickly RDP, remote desktop sessions, became a thing for people to connect to, or installing let's say an SAP application launcher locally at a PC at home, and then VPNing into the company to make sure that you could access that environment. VPN is a bad thing in many ways. I'm not saying VPN is a bad thing. VPN can be a bad thing in a lot of ways, and especially the overhead and the fact that you live so far away from your data. So with a good VDI deployment, and keep in mind that a good VDI deployment still includes the proper encryptions and stuff like that without having to set up a VPN. But when you're using a VDI or an SBC solution, what you are actually doing is, instead of moving that data towards the user, letting the user edit it and then sending it back to the data center, you're actually moving that user to the data center. In other words, that user is only getting a representation on its screen of all that internal data. And think about the security happiness you have when all that data stays in your own data center and it's editing that data in the data center. So the latency that you get from that with working with the applications and the end user experience that you get with that application without having that VPN, but still having full control, is a lot better. Last but not least, again, but I already mentioned this in the previous point, not having to install that company legacy application on a end user managed device. It's also a big benefit over here. So which industries is the next question? Well, I can be extremely simple about that. That's basically any industry that you can think about. Me, as a former military, am very aware of the fact that systems that need to be taken into the field, if they get lost, that information that is on those systems can end up in the wrong hands. Having a system that is able to connect to a remote desktop that is basically, for all I care, in the country of origin, is a way more secure thing. Doctors accessing data, working from home, but still having their data in the hospital, in the data center. You name it. Basically, any industry can benefit from it. Having said that, any industry, yes, definitely. Everybody, not always. There are cases that it's not going to fit, but I think the best rule is that there is always an exception to a rule. So how do we build this? Any solution is the sum of its parts. In other words, we take a number of parts, put them together, and they become the solution. In a VDI or in a SBC environment, it always starts with some form of broker. The broker is the brains in the middle of the solution. So the broker knows what all of the components in that solution are doing and is orchestrating between sessions, between desktops, between SBC sessions, between firewall movements, etc. So next to the broker, we have the systems that we offer. And with the systems that we offer, we mean the virtual desktops, the Windows 10 systems that you're going to offer, or the server-based computing mechanisms, or, and this is totally not unheard of, both of them. The VDI and RDS. Obviously, the next part is the clients, and let's make these clients internal. So these clients can communicate directly with the broker, and they are in the same security zone as that broker. That security zone, in my case, we call the secure zone. Obviously, VDI and SBC both are also very well targeted at remote work. So for remote work, we need some kind of gateway. Now, almost all of the products that I know of, but at least anyways, all of the products that we at Scale work with come with a gateway functionality. This gateway, as you can see over here, is placed in your demilitarized or insecure zone. And this one manages all the connections from the outside to the inside, so that people that come from the outside do not have direct access to equipment in your secure zone, but first have to authenticate and authorize against a gateway. And once that is done, only on specific protocol ports can they communicate with the solution. So immediately making this a more secure system. Obviously, all of that kit can run on top of a skill cluster. So all of the components that you see over here, and even the network divide, can be created within a skill cluster. So when we're talking about architecture, we are also talking about a lot of decisions that we need to make. So the first decision that we're going to need to take is persistent versus non-persistent. How are we, what are we going to do, and how are we going to do it? So both of them have their downsides and both of them have their upside. I've tried to list them over here, but I'm not going to read up anything. The main thing here is, how do your users work and what are they really dependent on? So if you have a call center full of people, this probably also means that you have a lot of flex workers coming in, people leaving, a lot of different people. In this case, non-persistent can be a very, very big benefit, because those users usually only require a few line of business applications, and they do not benefit from having their own profile or having their own settings. No, they just need to do their day-to-day job. These people, in the morning when they log in, they get a brand new system, they work on it the whole day, and at the end of the day, when they log out, that system is being destroyed. Next day when they come in again, it's being built from a larger template. The nice thing about this, and I've mentioned this before, is that template is something that's really, really easy to maintain. If there is a Windows update, I just open up the template, install the Windows update, push it out again, and all my systems are updated. If I have an application update, same, etc. Persistent, more for people that require, for instance, the capability of being able to reboot this system. So if you have developers in your organization, if you have people that are local admins on their machines because they need to install their own tools, because they need to be able to install plugins in a CAD application, etc. Their personal data always remains on that system. And that's actually one of the use cases for VDI, for instance, within banking, because within banking, quite often there is a rule set that determines that profile data of a user cannot remain on a system when that system is no longer being used. So with non-persistent, if a system is not being used, it's being deleted. No risk of having your profile data on there. The other thing that you need to determine here is how am I going to arrange profiles. So you just heard me said non-persistent is really good for people who do not require a profile, but quite often the end user experience does get better with a profile, or even a sense of binding with what they're doing, their own work set. So to work with that, you can set up a profile solution. Choices that you have there are many. For instance, here at Scale, we have done a couple of things together with Liquidware, and they have a brilliant solution there. If you already have Microsoft contracts in quite a lot of the cases, FSLogix is a free tool. If you're already familiar with Ivanti, because Ivanti is, I think, in combination with REST, one of the longest living partners in that. If you're comfortable with that, you can obviously go with that. And if you, I'm not going to say it out loud, but if you really don't have a clue, you can also work with Microsoft roaming profiles. Basically, these help you to A, get login times down, and B, give people a more personalized environment. And keep in mind that most of these solutions that I've listed here also come with their own policy sets and allow you to even more granularly decide what a user can and cannot do within his environment. And then there's the and also section. Are you going to do disaster recovery, and how are you going to do it? Are you going to set up a DR site, or are you going to set up a backup pool? Are you going to or not going to replicate images? These are things that I most certainly would discuss with my SE if I was going into a discussion like this. Network and internetwork bandwidth. Although a VDI solution often is better in terms of network bandwidth than, for instance, for example, a VPN, there is bandwidth being consumed, and you do need to keep that in mind in how to size that. Are you going to load balance between environments? All of the solutions that we support actually also support load balancing, things like that. And which components are you going to backup, and which components are not worth doing the backup? All of these are things that you should take into consideration when you are designing a VDI solution. So guidelines, the truth is out there. If you go onto the internet and you do a Google search on VDI sizing, you can find everything from a one-pager with handles up to white papers of people of large virtualization companies that have written basically book-sized white papers on what you should consider when sizing. And obviously, there is a place for these documents, but one of the things that I always tend to say is that sizing is by no means an exact science. There's a couple of things, though, that you can definitely take into account. So first one comes with storage users. This is a very simple one and one that's really easy to calculate. Basically, how much storage does a type of user use? And I'll get back to the type of user in, I hope, 1 minute. Same goes for CPU usage. Am I going to use one CPU? Am I going to use two CPUs? Or am I going to use lesser CPUs and offload with GPUs? These are things that are quite easy to determine, including RAM usage. Now, user types, one of the things that I like to do, and it's actually something that you see in all user sizings, is that we divide our company into groups of people. And in the most basic version, you have the power user, the task worker, and the I always have to look that up. You have the power user, the knowledge worker, and the task worker. I'm actually going to keep this over here. And what you can do, and actually what I have done in a document that we're going to release really soon onto the partner website, is we've created a calculator that you can use to give those things that we previously discussed, the RAM, the disk, all those, give it in and determine those profiles. So basically a task worker is a user that you can compare that to the call center user. So he has very repetitive work in 1 or 2 line of business applications. Think about the call center employee, think about a front office employee, think about a receptionist, something like that. Then we have the knowledge users. These are the users that usually use 1 or 2 line of business applications, but also have some other responsibilities outside of this, usually do more hefty reporting, things like that. And last but not least, we have the power users. These are the users that are usually graphical or developers or things like that. And basically, if you divide your company up into these 3 users and then determine how many of these users you have and how many resources they consume, you get to a required set of resources that you need. And with that required set of resources that you need, we can actually give you a pretty good estimation of what kind of a system that you need. Obviously, I've put this warning over the center of this slide saying this is just a guideline. There are some really smart tools in the market that will help you to see whether or not your calculations are correct, whether or not your calculations actually make sense. In this case, one of the things that we've done internally is we've used a tool that's called Login VSI to first create a system and then in the end measure with my applications installed, with my user profiles created, with a fictive workload on those systems, how many desktops can we actually fit onto a system. And the sizing tool, this sizing sheet, it's just a guidance. Make sure that you always measure and make sure that you have the right numbers. Next to that, another document that I hope to release next week, or that we hope to release next week, is an agnostic understanding of VDI. Remember that I told you about all those white papers that you can find. This is one with my simplified view in there, which we're also going to launch into the community onto the partner website. So you can use this as a guideline on how to determine your users, how to determine how many resources they require, and then combining that with the document with the sizing calculator. So I've talked about partnerships a couple of times. We have a couple of parties that we work together with, 2 of them right now in the VDI workspace. And they are Parallels RES for both VDI and server-based computing, and LeoStream for VDI. They also do a server-based computing, but you would actually require a second broker, a complex story. If you want to know more about it, please ask me. So what I've prepared for you is a small demo, and I'm going to do the demo in a Parallels environment. So over here, I am already logged in, and oh, other side. Like I said, I am already logged in. And when you log into my demo environment, in this case, my demo environment, what you will see is you will have a HTML5 overview where I have a couple of application folders and a desktop folder. Now, a desktop folder, very easy. I can go in there and I can start a desktop. And right now I have configured this to use an HTML5 session. And actually it's preparing my desktop, which means that I forgot to prepare a desktop for you. But this desktop is actively being built right now, and you can use that. And in that same way, I can also access applications. So let me show that over here. When I go into this apps group, I can open up Notepad. And one of the things that I really like about this is within this HTML5 overview, I get my application Notepad. And one of the things that I really like is you can actually see over here that it's running within this environment, within this HTML5 environment. So remember that I told you that you don't need to install any form of a client or anything like that. You can just work on it. here you go. You can actually use an HTML5 browser to do this. And let me quickly disconnect this one because that's not going to work, unfortunately. Let me take that other one. So over here, I can connect to a virtual desktop, and also this virtual desktop is running within an HTML5 environment. So I can dismiss this and I can make this full screen, and you can actually see that I have a full HTML5 virtual desktop with all the tools that I can hope to use. The thing that I would like to show you in this desktop is we've talked about two different technologies. So we've talked about virtual desktop infrastructure, and we've talked about server-based computing. And at a certain point in this presentation, we talked about having to make a decision on whether to use virtual desktoping or whether to use server-based computing. My answer to that would immediately be why not both? So one of the things that you can do in a virtual desktop like this is use a Parallels REST connection to your applications. So let's say that I have a application that I need to run, and now I need to quickly find my phone because I need to type in an OTP. Let's say that you have an application, and that application is only suited for 4 or 5 of your users. You could make an application package. You could make a there we go. Oh, that didn't go well. You can make a separate application. You can make a this is always a thing that you'll see. You can make an application, or you can make a separate image, but you could also publish that application as a published application to that user, meaning you don't have to change anything to that person's virtual desktop. All you need to do is publish that published application within that virtual desktop. Let's try one more time. There we go. And here you can see, you just saw the list with applications that I have. Here I can open those same applications. Here I can open that same version of Notepad and continue to work with that from within my virtual desktop. And I hope that you can see that this actually has the same technical roadmap demo, shebang in there. So in short, this is what I wanted to show you, and this is what to be perfectly honest, what I wanted to tease you with to get more into the subject. Any questions, Scott? Is there anything interesting in there that you can tell me?
The one immediate one was from regarding HTML5 browser. Is there HTML5 browser functionality the same as Parallels for LeoStream?
With Parallels, it's I think it's a little bit better. With Parallels, the biggest benefit there is that it's natively built for maximizing your screen. So you saw that when I connected to my desktop over here, I immediately get a message, this is better viewed full screen. And when I put this full screen, I immediately have the feeling that I'm working on a single system. The other thing that I think is slightly better integrated is the clipboard and the way that you work with things. Last but not least, and I think this is quite a biggie, is that Parallels actually has a printer driver for local printers in their HTML5 client, which LeoStream does not.